Hello everybody, and welcome to another week of Tryhard Tuesdays, where we try to learn how to play a little bit harder, or in this case, blow your eardrums out on the stream. We don't want anyone listening to the show, and so that's why the music was so loud. But we're back again this week. This week is going to be, we're going to be talking a lot about mitigating the effects of playing way too much Dota in a tryhard fashion. I think it's something we've all been really accustomed to feeling. You know, you start to feel like you're capping out, or like you can't improve anymore, or at the very least you go sour in your mindset. I know I've gotten that way, and I've come back from it, and I've also gone that way again. It's just like anything else in Dota, from mechanics to positioning to farming to anything else, it feels like keeping on top of a mindset and not tilting is equally important. So we're going to spend the majority of the episode talking about that, and joining me are Mr. Blue 22. How are you, Blue?
I'm good. I am not tilted. It's a good day not to be tilted.
Yeah, I agree.
Feels good.
We also have joining us someone who's become a staple of the show for the past couple of shows, and that's Gorgon the Wonder Cow. How are you, Gorgon?
I'm doing well. It's nice to be back, and I am perpetually tilted. I live in an MC Escher painting, so it's perfect. Like, you don't even know. Once you live it and breathe it in a surrealist fashion, you never even know what's up and down. It's perfect.
And then you just go to techies.
It's the rest of the world that's
Exactly.
Right. Perspective.
You make other people tilt, and then you just become the tilt monster. But what I want to jump into mainly is it's a very competitive game. I mean, we all know that. So I kind of want to talk about what we do to mitigate that that tilt feeling. Do you guys have any important ideas that you can throw out? Any type of, I don't know, exercises or ways to keep your mindset fresh, etc.?
Do you want to start, Gorgon? I've got a few, but
I'll let you. No, go ahead.
Yeah?
It's a Mr. Blue show right now. Do your thing.
Okay. So for me, one of the biggest things is really, like, I feel like it's a really good time to talk about this because, you know, you have a lot of college kids and some high school students. And, you know, in Billy Bob's case, maybe some middle school students. You know, and they're on their break very soon, so they're going to have a whole lot of time to play a whole lot of Dota. And I think the first thing that I think of when I hear people going like, "Oh, I'm going to play, 12 hours straight of Dota," and my first thought is, please don't do that, because you're going to go on tilt by hour 3. By hour 4, you're going to go crazy. You're going to rage, and you're going to hate the game, and your play for the next 6 hours is going to suffer for it. So pace yourself. This sounds like a really obvious one, but it's one that, like, I know I've fallen into, where it's like you play one game and you're like, I got to make up for that. And then you play another game and I got to make up for that. I can't go out on this.
Yeah, it's the process of pot committing. It's poker, right? You lost a hand, now you feel down. You want to make sure you get your chips back so that you have table control. It's the exact same thing with MMR, ELO, or anything else. Once you lose a game, you feel like you need to even out your losses, or you don't have control of your state anymore, and it is that same gambler's mentality that leads to that, I think.
Yeah, it feels like you need to start taking more risks, and that's definitely the gambling mentality, is instead of looking at a game and saying, well, here's a draft, and I'm good at this hero, I can work this hero in, or I can go for like an Ursa jungle where it doesn't work because I've kicked ass with Ursa before, or something like that. You try to eke out a little bit of an advantage by having that cheap victory or whatever. And that gambling aspect is very important, and one we'll probably spend a while talking about, because that psychology is very detrimental to trying to improve at anything, I think. You're not looking at it in terms of, I'm going to focus hard on my mechanics and all the other basics of the game. You're looking at it more in a sense of, I'm going to try to eke out this cheap victory real fast. So I think that's a very fascinating point.
Yeah, and I think if you were to put it at like a micro level, a good example is something like your like farming rotation. Maybe in your first game they had a Spirit Breaker, Tusk lineup, and they just ran at you every time you went to the jungle to farm. And then the next game you subconsciously go, okay, well, I'm not going to do that. That's too risky. I'm just going to sit in lane and get next to nothing and sap XP. And then you suffer based on that. So it's like, it's compartmentalizing each game and also taking a little break in between to get your head straight if it didn't go so great.
Yeah, if you are the sort of player who does run an emotional game, then you're the sort of player who needs to take a break between games. Like that's just the way it is. If you are not that sort of player, then I think you can trail games into each other all day long. It doesn't really matter. What is really important, kind of what Mr. Blue is drinking at, is that every game is an independent event, right? You can't see game X as having been integrally related to game Y, having been integrally related to game Z, or you will get into this feedback loop where you never really get your head back on straight. And this is something you see a lot in competitive level Dota. There are some teams that are really, really good at taking a game or a series loss and just kind of rolling with it and not focusing very heavily on why they lost or what had happened, just trying to take away any sort of small communication differences that they can move into the next game, but not lingering on the idea. This is even important as a concept in the middle of a game. Like, if you lose a big team fight, and you sit and you argue and you linger about whose fault that team fight was or why that team fight was lost, you probably just lost the game. But if you lose a team fight and you go, all right, that's okay, we don't need to focus on why we lost that fight, we need to focus on how we don't lose future fights, you have a good chance of pulling a game back. It's at every level, between series, between games, in between team fights, in a game, that idea of keeping an outlook that is that is focused on what is coming rather than what has come, that is just the lifeblood of success in Dota, I think.
It's a reactionary game for sure.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I'll just finish my point real fast.
Just do it. Fine.
It's
right off.
Yeah, we haven't seen each other in a while, like at least in stream. So that's my passive aggressive way of where you been. But I think it's a reactionary game in the sense that if you're too fixated on the past, whether if you didn't get enough farm or your tower gets taken as a safe lane carry at 10 minutes or whatever, and you're too focused up on that, it leads to an additional psychology where you feel like your team had let you down or something.
Yep.
And when you start to put all that off onto other people, it's not only unfair to your teammates, but it takes power away from you as the individual player in the game. You're no longer, like you said, being a reactionary force. You're more just thinking, 10 minutes GG, it's never going to happen, and it's all because of these idiots. You know, it slaughters communication, it slaughters your own skill, and it delegitimizes what you're trying to accomplish.
Or if you get hyper analytical about it, like you have to have very specific reasons for doing it. Like it has to be something that you know will happen again and will determine, whether or not a huge number of objectives get taken. Otherwise, it's just going to fall on deaf ears and people are going to tune you out,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there's a difference in a game. Since we are talking about individual games at their most basic, right? There's a difference in the game between saying, we lost that fight because we initiated with our support too early. What we really need to do is make sure everybody is ready for the initiation. There's a difference between specifying that and trying to get the whole team on the same page, as opposed to blaming the support, right? Or blaming the person who initiated early and driving it into them so that you are not yourself or your teammates are not themselves blamed, right? There's a difference between analyzing what went wrong and then moving on, having learned that lesson, compared to assigning blame. Those are very distinct things.
Yeah, and they show themselves in the language. If you start a sentence by saying, where were you, blah, 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 usually it's not going to go well. And it's more cathartic for you, or an attempt to be cathartic for you, than it is to actually, affect something later on in the game. But anyways, we've talked a lot about communication. I mean, what are other ways that you guys approach, avoiding tilt in your solo queues?
For me, in solo, it's very important to actually not over-communicate in ways. I feel like if I go in and I'm trying to call a lot of the shots, people immediately shut me out. And so I will kind of step off and let some performance take place first. And this is like the 3.2k level. It's not high at all, but I'll step off and I will get some kills. And by the time I have a team behind me from seeing that maybe I can, maybe I'm not a complete idiot, then they'll be more likely to communicate. But usually, at my skill bracket, when people step out and just start calling shots, that guy gets muted and ignored rather quickly, or insulted. And so for me, it's communicating, but not over-communicating. That means using the chat wheel a lot, using pings, but not overusing pings. So it's this delicate balance of being able to, have people there when you need them, but not commanding, and making sure that you're not trying to call all the shots too early in a game. I think that leadership establishes itself in every game, and it has its own natural individual rhythm, much like every game's individual, as Gorgon mentioned earlier. So to kind of go in and act like all your same communication tricks are going to work and everyone's just going to instantly get in line and follow you, I feel like that's kind of a naive mindset. So that's a huge one for me.
So this is a difficult issue. How much should you be communicating in a game? Because if you are playing way below your actual skill level, then you need to be over-communicating. You really, really do. So let's take, for example, a professional quality player, like a 6K quality player who is on a Smurf account or something and playing at a 5K level, right? That is a huge difference. That's maybe the equivalent of like a 3.5K player playing at a 1.5 to 2K level, right? These huge differences. You know better than those people what to be doing. You just do. You understand the game better. If I'm thrown into a game with PPD, I would hope that PPD would be telling me what to do, because he obviously knows better than I do where exactly to be and when and why, right? The same is true. If you are playing way above the skill level of the people around you, then you need to be explaining to them what they need to do, but you need to do it in a way that's approachable. Now, for the vast majority of people, even though they think that is applicable for them, for the vast majority of people, that's not applicable for you, right? You are probably about where you belong, and you might be plus or minus 500 MMR from where you should be, but that's not as huge of a deal at the range for most of the people, I think, who listen to the show, right? 500 MMR, if you are ranked around 2,000, 2,500, is nothing. It's the distinction in skill between 2,500 and 3,000 is fairly minimal compared to a similar distinction between much higher ranked players, right? If you are of a similar skill level to the people that are playing around you, then you need to be expressing the ideas that your allies are not aware of, right? But you don't need to express every little thing, because chances are they know a lot of the same stuff you do. I think that what's key is listening to your teammates, and what's key is expressing ideas to your teammates when they don't seem to be aware of those ideas. For example, we can move on this and get a kill here. Okay, if you express that and you get a kill, that's great. But if you're constantly overexpressing every little thing and trying to micro the entire game, chances are you're not focusing on your own hero very much. You've already tilted, and you're not focusing, and you'll probably just end up getting angry at your teammates. And B, your allies probably aren't going to listen to you, because you're more than likely making not 100% great calls, and they will focus on the calls that are bad.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something we have actually talked about in the show before, and that's the communication gap. People will focus on the negative a lot easier. So if you're playing at a skill level that you should be, like a player like me, then you need to be able to be cohorts with your team. You need to not distinguish yourself as someone that's way better than them, because you're not. And that's the truth of it. If you are PPD or something and you're playing and streaming at a much lower level and you somehow get like 4.5 or 5K players on your team.
Which happens.
Yeah, it does happen.
Yep.
It happens.
There's that respect there because that person has put in their time, but I haven't. And so to walk in when I'm tilting and act like I have is it's kind of insulting to the other people that are at your skill level, because you're immediately telling them that your words are worth more than theirs, and your calls are always going to be good. And if your calls mess up, then it's their fault.
And this we're kind of getting off the idea of tilting a little bit with this idea, but I do just want to specify that your communication pattern should match the personalities of your teammates. If you have 4 Peruvian teammates that don't speak English, it doesn't matter how much you communicate with the mic. What really is going to end up mattering is how you are communicating through non-verbal means, through pings, through chat wheel, through character positioning, that sort of stuff. Whereas if you get thrown into a matchmaking with 3 or 4 really boisterous, rude, loud people, then chances are you're just going to have to try and play for the team and figure out which one of those people is mechanically the best and kind of make sure that they are having a good game, right? Because those sorts of players are not really going to listen to their teammates usually. You kind of have to match your communication patterns to your team. It doesn't do you any good to get mad because you got a bad team. That won't make you win faster or more, right? Getting mad will only make you lose more.
Yeah, indeed. And, I mean, we're not talking like huge rage outs or anything. Just kind of like getting super salty can affect your team terribly. I mean, just being unwilling to cooperate, being unwilling to communicate, being unwilling to ward or appreciate that kind of aspect of the game. Even as like a carry position, I've noticed, sometimes it's better to just grab your own freaking jungle ward and throw it up there if you need to. And sometimes, you know, like, it's best not to make a comment about it, or it's best not to make a comment when someone goes toward the rune and dies. And so it's just that idea of knowing people's limits, and I guess exercising empathy is what I'm getting to the point here, but it's not so much about each individual's personality, but more being approachable in the sense that you can hedge your bets in your communication and your behavior to ensure that everyone can accomplish a goal.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. So, like I said, there are certain teams that are really good at not tilting, and there are certain teams that are very emotional, and certain players who are really good at not tilting, and certain players who are known for being very emotional. Like, Evil Geniuses is a team that we see come out of lower brackets fairly frequently. That's difficult to do because you take a major loss, you get thrown into an elimination bracket, and certain teams just have a mindset that comes down to focus on the future. And I think when it comes to avoiding tilt, it's all about focusing on the future, not lingering on the past. When you start to linger on something that has already happened, whether it be in a game or in a series of games or across a week of playing or across your career in Dota, right? If you start to linger on things that have happened, you are no longer actively part of the solution.
Yeah, indeed. What do you feel about that, Blue? You haven't said anything in a while.
Yeah, I've just been sitting back and kind of thinking about it. I think that from the sound of it, the best way to not go on tilt is to not tilt everyone else by either talking or complaining and, you know, just kind of sucking it up when they aren't doing what you're thinking they're going to do. And that's something I noticed even in, you know, just by watching pro players streaming is you see, you know, they're bitching to their viewers about this guy that's playing really stupidly. They're not saying anything in the game. That hasn't fixed anything for them in the past. Why are they going to do it? I think I saw a Banana Slam Jam of the game yesterday where he was mid Zeus and he, you know, he was going up against a bunch of 5K players and he was, you know, of course, bitching about how they are, being 5K players, which is they're just 5-manning everywhere. And, you know, how do you play against that? And it's so annoying to deal with, you know, and his team is about the same. So they want to do the same thing, but he's not like bitching at them on the mic or in the chat. You know, he's trying to direct them. He's being short and quick about what he wants to happen. It's, you know, granted, I think they may have barely lost that game, but it sure as hell looked a lot worse at the start than I thought it would have gone. I know in my game, you know, it would be immediate tilt, like, all right, what are you guys doing here? Why do you have 2 supports just sitting here stacking the jungle? What's happened to our carry lane? You know, just, you know, you're asking all these questions that really, you're not really interested in the answer to them. You just want to feel better about your own play by blaming someone else's. So I feel like that's like the key to tilting is to just keep that mic on mute until you really, really, really need it.
Yeah, if you're not a well self-controlled individual and you do tend to get angry, like just for your success rate, it's probably better if you don't play with an open mic, right? Because if you are tilting, your team can still win. Even if you're not playing that well, your team can still win. But if you're tilting and you're yelling at your team, and so now your team is also tilting, the odds of winning they skyrocket down as the teamwork falls apart, right? So if you got 4 people that have good attitudes and you're fuming over stuff, just shut up, right? Keep it to yourself. You might still win. But if you're that kind of player, I don't think that anything that I can say will help you with this particular issue of don't tilt. Like, the key, not tilting is not difficult. The premise of not tilting is stay calm and focus on what the best thing for you to do right now is. That, as a concept, is not hard, right? Just don't rage. It's basically all it is.
But it's like quicksand in the fact that when you start raging, and if you do have that personality type, you just slip away. And it's like you can't stop because now you've given attribution to why the game is a bad time for you or why you're losing. And,
or you rage, you miss something because you rage, but you rage at someone else for missing it. And then it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, or you're still raging about something earlier, which makes... Yeah, exactly. It just kind of builds on itself. And so, you're right about the practical application of that. It's not hard. It's not a hard thing to understand. It's just don't, you know? You don't treat people terribly in that sense, or it's going to make your games a lot more miserable for you. Because when they leave the game, they can leave without that attitude if they choose to do that. But you really can't. I mean, if you don't take that advice, you know? So I definitely agree with you on there. I next want to talk about muting. When is it a good idea to mute? When do you decide that someone's crossed that line? When do you say, okay, this is someone that's not going to give me anything through the mic communication, they're gone? When does that line happen for you two?
Blue, do you have a line? I don't have a line. I just mute people depending on my mood. I literally, I'll just like, I don't want to hear this guy. I'll mute him right away. And then there are some games where I'll listen to somebody who contributes nothing and just shit talks, and I'll happily listen to him for an hour. Like, it depends on the day. You know, it is as much about how well, what condition you are in terms of your ability to handle bullshit, as it is what your allies are saying, because
that
some
is
days,
the best way to put it. That's so true. It's like, what can I withstand today?
Yeah, because some days people might be like legitimately telling you good information, but with just a little bit of snark, and you're not prepared for that, so you're going to mute them, even though they could be helping you, and like listening to them could be helpful. And some days it could just be trolls, and you are completely invulnerable in terms of your demeanor. So you just kind of laugh along with it. You know, it's really a call that you have to make. Basically, if listening to somebody is making you play worse, you should probably mute them.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's typically my line. It's also like if you're being egregiously, like, I don't know, abusive. You see a lot of people that just like scream into the mic. That's an auto mute for me and not ever getting unmuted. But also, I tend to give people a little bit more leeway if they're adding more to the team mechanically or otherwise. So I won't necessarily mute someone even if they bug me, even on a bad day, you know? Like if, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm able to dissect that and realize that I don't necessarily need to like a person to accomplish a common goal.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm really on lately, which I'm told is a big part of kind of improving past the 3K terrain, is kind of understanding that you only need to play, you know, a 40-minute to an hour game with some of these people if it's a long game, and even less if it's a shorter game. So you can just kind of put it out of your mind, understand that these people, you don't have to marry them, you don't have to be good friends with them, you don't even have to play with them again. But you can accomplish a goal, and you could win, and you can get that 25 points or whatever. Or if you're playing a normal match, just get a normal match, and you don't have to let it weigh on you so much. And so that's something big with tilting for me, is not internalizing all of that. If some guy on the internet insults you, you kind of have to have some thick skin to play Dota at times. I mean, we've all kind of been, I'm sure, like harassed in weird ways. I mean, one time I got force staffed up onto a cliff, and a guy just kept flying the courier away from me as I yelled at him. And I was like, this game's fucked up in a way, because people can do this, and they do it sometimes if they get bored. And so someone told me, and I think in the Purge guide, the Welcome to Dota You Suck, he mentions you have to have some thick skin, and that's not taking everything everyone says to heart, understanding that you don't have to internalize that.
Fuck you, Wazoo. We have to agree on a philosophical and religious level to have any shot at winning this game. That's how I approach Dota. That's how I approach life.
Okay, I'll just nod. Muted. I just muted you on Skype. No, I'm joking. Don't talk. If you want to stay friends with people, don't talk about religion or politics.
Or Dota.
Or Dota. Even when you're playing Dota.
What I do all the time, all day, every day is I come on you know what, my first topic, first 2 minutes right before we get the rune. Guys, how do you feel about abortion? You in? You out? You pro-choice? All right, let's do this, boys. Let's go. And if we're not, it's mutes all around. So when you asked about the line for muting, I mean, that's where I draw the line.
Politically.
I have a very strong moral center, Wazoo.
Okay.
Political moral center, nonetheless. That's something special, my friend.
Yeah, there you go. I'm voting for Trump, so... No, I'm joking.
All right. Move that Doom picture over to him.
Yeah, I'd be Doom. But, so we've talked a little bit about the mitigation of that. What I want to talk about next is we have been taking a slight ranked-cation. I know you have, Blue. And, Gorgon, I know you've been prone to spamming some heroes. Does that help with any type of... I don't know, any type of tilt you play to take a break and rather than focus on like this is the best hero for this scenario, rather just look at things like I'm going to just play what I want to play, have fun for a change with this game?
I spend most of my time playing Dota randoming. Okay. So I have spammed some specific heroes. I spammed techies for a little while last year. Other than techie spam, I don't know that I've spammed anybody else intentionally. So I have about 2,500 games of Dota 2 and then more Dota 1 games before that. But I've got about 2,500 games of Dota 2. I've never played any hero more than 163 times.
Interesting. What is your high hero?
I have a pretty equal distribution between my top 40 heroes or whatever, right?
What is your most played hero?
Shadow Demon.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. I've seen you play him quite a bit.
So Shadow Demon is a hero that I used to really, really like. And that I still do really, really like. But second most is techies, and then it kind of tapers off to... I mostly play support as well, so I've got a lot of supports up there. But yeah. So I have spammed heroes a couple of times, I guess. Mostly techies, because I find techies hilarious. And so if I am having trouble or whatever, I will just go to techies and have fun. Because I'm that sort of awful human being. But in general, I think a good method for avoiding tilting is just don't take the game that seriously, to be honest. Try your hardest. Like, don't just go in and throw games or whatever, but at the same time, you need to be willing to pick for your team and pick for your situation, and sometimes that might mean playing a hero that you don't like. A lot of times, if my team is not very communicative at the start of the draft, I'll first pick random, because, once again, I'm that sort of awful human being. And, I don't know, I find that I don't typically take, when I play Dota, that seriously, to be honest. Like, I almost exclusively play ranked, and I spend a lot of my time randoming heroes. So if that gives you an idea of, like, I would play ranked all random if I could.
You just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Like, I don't play Dota for a living. You know what I mean? It's not. Yeah. I will never be a professional player.
So you don't live and die on the 25 points. You haven't really hit that point where you need a ranked cation, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I've definitely hit it, but not like. So this time last year, I barely played, right? I lost over 1,000 MMR in about 2 months.
Oh boy!
And in that period, and in that period, I only played 3 games that did not have somebody who declared they were intentionally feeding, somebody who AFK'd for long periods of time in the game, at least one long period close to the drop time, or somebody who dropped from the game. So 3 games in months of playing that didn't have one of those 3 conditions. And I had somebody who was living with me verify those things. So it's not like I'm exaggerating the case. Like, I got so frustrated by it that I had somebody actually check every time that it happened to just make sure that I wasn't crazy, right?
And then Techies Man was born?
Techies was born like 3 or 4 months later. Yeah, the Techies. So, I don't know. I tilted a bit there because I felt like I was not enjoying the game because I was not finding fair games. And that's really the only thing that tilts me, is when I feel like I am not... Like, I don't mind losing. I mind losing because there's just no way to win. That's really what gets me. If that's perpetual, where I feel like the odds are just stacked against me, my team is always non-communicative, and they're abandoning, and they're AFKing, and they're intentionally feeding, those are the sorts of games that if they chain up for me, it bothers me, because I feel like there's no real way for me to have fun there. It's just a waste of my time. Short of that, I don't typically tilt. It's like I said, it's a game, right? You don't do it professionally. You want to be good at it. It's a very competitive game, and that's what the draw is. But at the end of the day, there's always another game to win 25, right?
Yeah, I heard an interesting, comparison between CSGO, another Valve game, and Dota 2. And that's that CSGO has restarts built in within the game, where the second you lose a round, you die, you're back to whatever you were doing earlier with less or more money, depending on how you did. Dota doesn't have that. It has this rolling type of mentality where one small mistake at the beginning of the game could roll throughout the entire game. And that's kind of what I think about with some of these situations that you mentioned, is that people see a situation like that develop and they say, well, I'm just going to make this game end as quickly as possible. And it's really surprised me that there hasn't been more control from Valve or more punishment when it comes to that kind of thing, because they do have other systems in place in their other games where they're punished pretty harshly. So that's terrible to hear about that experience you had, because I know we've all been in situations like that, but that streak sounds absolutely mind-numbing and might even just turn me off to the game completely.
Well, but I came out of it, right? I still play Dota. I still work with Dota professionally. I climbed all that MMR plus more back up. If you belong where you are, even if you take a really weird, statistically unlikely trip to the bowels of hell, Orpheus style, right? Even if you take that journey, you'll be able to climb your way back up eventually. It's just a matter of finding a proper time, taking maybe a break, focusing on getting some fundamentals down, and working your way back up. And it's really, discouraging, but it's there. The opportunity's there. One thing I will say is that as you understand the game of Dota better, you will start to see those what you call breaks, which are actually a good term for it. It's something that breaks. They exist in Kumite, in boxing, they exist in judo, they exist in fighting games, they exist in CSGO, and they still do exist in Dota, but they're not as obvious, right? Yeah. In CSGO, it's obvious the round is over. There's a break. But in Dota, it really is an objective was taken. Your opponents have to back off because they don't have the force to take another objective. You now have 35 seconds for your team to regroup. That is really a form of a break, and that's a good time usually for your team to try and go out and get warding up, to take a smoke, to grab the farm, that sort of stuff. What I will say about CSGO that I do like about the strategy of that game as opposed to Dota is that there is a reset of advantage halfway through the game, right? 15 rounds in, you switch sides, all money goes back to zero, there's a pistol round again, and then you work your way back up. So Dota doesn't have that unless you're playing a best of 3, right? But it does have less significant breaks the same way that Street Fighter or Super Smash Brothers would, in similar to those esports.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I didn't even think about that, because you definitely have lulls after objectives are taken.
Well, you do sometimes.
Not always, but you're very rarely going to see Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 Roshan, Rack, all rolled in the same 5 minutes, right?
It's very true.
Not common.
I just mentioned because I have noticed that when I've been playing with a few friends who are 1.5K and I don't know, anytime 1.5 and 2K, 1 to 2K, let's say, it feels like the kind of breaks that we're talking about don't really happen a lot, because it's I have my ultimates, fight. We're not taking a break. And obviously, if you're the better player, okay, well, I'm going to be taking a break. I'm going to go farm this other lane that everyone is ignoring.
Yeah.
But when you're in that mode, it's hard to realize now is the time to take the break.
I would argue
alone might be a room for improvement kind of thing.
Yeah, I would argue that the break exists and that the players are choosing to ignore it. Right? They are making a play error to not take the break, just like a shortstop might have a line drive go past him and miss it. That's a play error. That the guy the ball could have been caught there, but he opted to let it go past him because he made a mistake. Right? He did not play perfectly.
I guess my point is I'm trying to indicate to players at those levels, those are the breaks. This is here's your sign.
Right.
Like when just like you said, when like a tier 2's been taken, okay guys, can we go to Roche? No. All right, maybe let's just go back and farm. We don't have to force a tier 3 and then you have your weird rubber banding from tier 3 to tier 3, I die, you die, over and over again.
It's time to be capitalized on. Yeah.
Recognizing breaks is much more important too if you are the team that's losing than if you are the team that's winning, because the longer you can pad out your opportunity as a losing team, the more likely it is that your opponents will make a mistake, right? So if you are on the backside of losing objectives and you are drilling into your opponents to try and recover that, but your team does not have the farm or the lineup in order to do so, that's a play error, and you'll end up losing the game because of that. But this is one of the issues with Dota being so complicated and so-called the action breaks or the advantage breaks being so difficult to point out, because it's a very fluid, constant game. And whether you're supposed to be active right now, or supposed to be defensive right now, or supposed to be taking ganks, or supposed to be farming, that's all very situational, and there's no rule of thumb for all situations that you can just follow like an algorithm.
Unless you listen to Tryhard Tuesdays.
Yeah, that's right.
With all these 3 great personalities. But that point on the break is very interesting in terms of thinking about the ebb and flow of the game and how it can really help you break down kind of that game anxiety and get out of tilt yourself. Like if you're recognizing that flow of the game and you're able to say, well, we might have given up something bad in the first 10 minutes, but if we hold off until this next time in the ebb and flow, we may be able to capitalize on something later and then pull that comeback. I think the hopelessness is something big with tilt. And so if you don't look at the game as a hopeless affair, like you said, with all those people that feed and stuff, which is a pretty obvious example, but not all games are that bad. So if you're able to look at it in a way that it is recoverable, then that can help your tilt, at least in my experience.
No, I would agree with that. It's about keeping positive attitude, right? Or trying to at least keep a neutral attitude, trying to work towards success.
But I think that's a lot of what we wanted to go over with Tilt. I want to spend the last bit of the show kind of going over weird lane combos. And I guess an item build if you guys have one. I haven't thought of one, but I got an interesting lane combo requested that I just kind of wanted to talk about in Theorycraft with you guys a little bit, even though that's not our show. But someone sent it to me, and so I felt obligated to put it on the show. And that
let's talk about it.
That lane was Clockwork Maiden off lane. What do you guys think of that? Nasty?
So I prefer to typically see the Clockwork solo.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because he's very level dependent, right? In an off-lane situation, having the support there is no camp to reliably pull from to leech additional experience, which means that both your Clockwork and your Maiden will end up a little under-leveled. So it could work if you're getting lots of kills. But if you're not getting kills, I don't really see what the Maiden adds to that lane that the Clockwork doesn't already have.
Yeah, pretty much she just has the catch and the stun.
Right.
But otherwise, it feels like it's going to be a little bit difficult for the clock to, I don't know, like even to get kills in ways. I mean, you can cog someone in, but even then, it's like, why is the Maiden in the lane in that sense? But what about you? What do you think about?
I was going to say that sounds more like it would be a great like offensive jungler you could stick in there if you could sneak her in for some reason. Maybe she smokes into their jungle and starts taking some camps. And once
that's very dangerous for such a squishy hero, though.
Yes, and but that's the only way I see this being a really truly effective quote combo is that she can come in and and gank a couple times from the enemy jungle once she hits level 3 and a Clockwork hits level 3, where maybe you have a battery assault on level 2 and you have your cogs. That could kill pretty much anyone who doesn't have like a blink ability.
It gives quite a lot of good setup too. I mean, for the cogs and stuff like that, you're always going to catch someone in cogs with a freeze. But and even then, once you hit level 6 and stuff, a hook into cogs and then hurl. I mean, pretty good. But at that point, you'd probably want her rotating as well, and not just specifically staying in the lane.
Yeah, or stacking jungle king. Like the majority of what she offers through the Clockwork, and she does offer synergy with the Clockwork, is that his mana pool is not huge, and she is able to provide more mana in lane, right? In the laning situation, he's going to be able to drop cogs and rocket much more often if you have an Arcane Aura, but the thing is Arcane Aura is global, so you don't need her in the lane for that. Another thing that I think maybe is being overlooked is the fact that Frostbite works for 10 seconds on creeps. Right, so Crystal Maiden, typically you want her to have access to the jungle, because she's going to be able to pull out of the jungle more golden experience than a typical support is able to, and because of that you're giving your team net gain from the resources available. With that 10-second Frostbite, you're able to jungle much more effectively.
And it's not too feasible for her, like if she was Radiant offlane, for instance, to go in and just keep snagging that large camp right next to the lane. It's probably not feasible for that to happen. The risk
is dangerous at best.
The risk outweighs the reward in ways.
I would counter this strange lane with a Lich Clockwork lane. I think that gets the concept that whoever it was that suggested this.
Interesting.
So I suspect the theory behind this Crystal Maiden Clockwork, and you can correct me if I'm wrong if you know, is that she is able to set up for a cogs trap, and then the two of them together are able to throw out a significant amount of harass.
Yeah, I'm sure that was the plan.
So a Lich is able to do all of that, but the Lich, because of Dark Pact, or whatever they call it, Dark Sacrifice now? I forget what they call it after Dota 1. But because of his ability to absorb creeps for experience, gets in the off lane a similar advantage to what Crystal Maiden gets in the safe lane with the jungle. He maximizes experience out of that situation. So he's going to be able to control your lane equilibrium better so that the Clockwork has favorable experience gain, right? He's able to pull more experience out of that lane so that the Clockwork and the Lich are not falling as far behind. He still has a ton of nuke potential and a slow to set up for the cogs, but you're not wasting the potential of the hero by putting him there.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, we have seen a lot more Lich in the offlane in our pubs lately, and I think it was, I can't remember, it was a high MMR, I think maybe around 6K level YouTuber, and he was talking about how difficult the carry lane is now in pubs at really high levels, because you see so many Lich Slardars, Lich Tusks, Lich insert, Doom, insert melee core in the off lane plus a Lich, and you just crush that lane so hard because you pull the wave so far towards you, and you can bully whoever it is in the carry lane. I don't know. What do you think about that? Have you seen in your pubs at all this kind of difficulty that the carries have against the offlane, or is it just, the normal stuff that you always deal with?
Yeah, I think so. The way that players are addressing safe lane, offlane right now is a little bit in limbo. We're seeing a bit more, I think at all skill levels, we're seeing a bit more 2-1-2 and a little bit less defensive tri-lane. Because of that, carries are, I think, innately having more difficulty because they don't have as safe of lanes. But what I will say is that Lich's popularity is, as far as I'm aware, on the rise in pubs, right? He works in dual offlane extremely, extremely well. He is still very low relative pick rate, though. He's on the rise slightly, but he's still down at like 6% or something. Mm-hmm. So this is a hero that you can really honestly abuse because people aren't expecting him as much. For basically any situation where you want to offset the potential of a strong safe laner, like an anti-mage, a Spectre, a Phantom Lancer, somebody who gets going and just steamrolls through your team, right? These hard, traditional farming carries. A Lich is a really good counter. Not only is he going to get rid of potential farm by just nixing off a creep every 20 seconds or whatever, but he's also going to be able to harass that carry out of lane and force supports to spend more time in the lane. The one thing I will say is that it's still really dangerous to put anybody in an off lane with an experience-dependent hero like a Clockwork. Because that Clockwork, his entire mid-game viability comes from getting a 6 relatively quickly, getting that Blade Mail up after a kill or two, or Force Staff if that's your style, and being able to aggress and initiate safely. And if he doesn't have more levels than your opponent's supports do, he's not going to be able to do that.
That's a very good way to break that down, and I feel like the Lich does add more. I mean, you don't have the obvious catch, but you got the slow and you have some damage capabilities that the Maiden might not have. So that's a great way to break that down. I appreciate that. I don't know if you have any type of item build of the week, Blue. Did you have anything you wanted to go over? Oh, yeah?
I do, yeah. It's one that I noticed it in a couple pro games that I've seen, and it's been No-Tail in specific. And you mentioned the PL just there in terms of making life difficult for them. So it reminded me, Phantom Lancer Blink Dagger, but not just Phantom Lancer Blink Dagger. It's like Phantom Lancer Blink Dagger at like the 40-minute mark. And it's something that's interesting because I haven't seen it really at all. I've seen it a couple times, just at random in a couple kind of with those like mid-tier teams use it. But I've seen No-Tail go for it almost like consistently, getting that late Blink Dagger after he gets something like a Manta, Scotty, Diffusal. He goes back for that. What do you think the logic behind that is, and how effective do you think it's been? Have you noticed it at all? First, I should start with that, Gorgon.
Oh, this is directed at me. For Phantom Lancer, we're talking Blink Dagger. It's not something that you see very often. It is something that you've seen since the rework. You've seen a occasional pickup of this in terms of like high-level play, professional level play. But what I will say is it's a survivability thing, right? It allows him to split push more effectively without having to worry about potentially dying. It's not as much an initiation
him compensating for that doppelganger change?
To some degree, but I saw this a handful of times even before then. Now that said, it's only been picked up like 30-ish times in all of professional Dota on Phantom Lancer. Like, it's not a tremendously popular item. Right. So we're talking a couple of % at most of games that this item has been picked up. It is to make up a bit for the change to Doppelganger, but actually it goes back to when he was changed away from Doppelwalk. Doppelwalk, his original ability, allowed him to be invisible for a period of time, which allowed him to split push and then walk away with impunity. Because in the late game, teams usually aren't going to be carrying dust because they are 6-slotted, right? So you had a little bit more freedom in order to potentially split push or initiate with that. When you got rid of that potential to move around, Doppelganger is, or whatever that move is called. Now I'm second guessing myself. The escape that he has, I think that's called Doppelganger. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So Doppelganger is much less potential for initiation and much less potential for de-initiation than a traditional blink. You always know where Phantom Lancer has ended up with a Doppelganger because he'll knock down trees and stuff. But he can use it to get over cliffs if he's good. He can use it to distract opponents with illusions. But when you get up to higher levels of play, those advantages are much smaller compared to a Blink Dagger, which allows you to go any direction pretty far.
And with the Manta and the Doppelganger, I've noticed with No-Tail in specific, he's really good at spacing that out. So even if he gets hit, he'll go pop the Manta, run a bit, Doppelganger, and by the time he comes out of the Doppelganger, he can blink again. And so, like, those ability, like, that really adds something to the hero in terms of survivability.
And for him, at that level of play, we're also talking, he's able to dodge a lot of damage with Manta style, because it gives you a 0.1 second invulnerability, I think. It might be 0.25, but I think it's 0.1 seconds. So you can dodge some stuff with Manta activation. You can also dodge stuff with Doppelganger activation, which makes it much easier for you to get that cooldown the 3-second cooldown off for the Blink Dagger so that you can de-initiate, compared to lower level players. This is not a build that I would recommend for low level players. I think damage is going to be much more effective at that bracket. But yeah, if you're having a ton of trouble with survivability and you're really, really good, the obvious solution is become harder to hit.
Yeah. I only mentioned the build, and it's interesting that you mentioned, because it's not really popular. I'd only seen it a couple times, and really it's because I'm kind of searching for new and interesting builds, because we're not seeing. I think we're kind of starting to see that 6.85 has been really figured out. So you're starting to see the same builds over and over and over again for each hero, and you kind of have. Alk will go down the, this Radiance path, or he'll go down this negative armor, Blink Dagger, Sanjin Yasha kind of build. And we're seeing the different avenues that have already been kind of mapped out. So I was kind of looking for anything on that, because I don't know, have you guys seen any other interesting item builds? But to me, it's a sign that we're ready for 6.86.
Yeah, it's interesting. It does have that, just in the order it's built. It's not picked up super early. It's not picked up mid-game. It's picked up late, and that's just because everyone's 6-slotted and he needs to get out of there. And there's probably it's a niche situation, but that, I think, fits the bill for our strange item build of the week. That definitely works.
So something else that I'll say that's strange on Phantom Lancer relative to what's popular but can be very effective is going in for a Silver Edge on Phantom Lancer. Yeah, that's a little bit more common than Blink, I think, but only narrowly. It's actually a little less common than Blink to finish it. Has a good win rate, but it's an expensive item, so you'd expect the win rate to be pretty good. It's not an ideal pick in most situations, but if you are up against a hero who has passives, the ability to break those passives can be extremely valuable. And what the Silver Edge also gives you is what that Doppel Walk used to give Phantom Lancer, which is the ability to initiate or de-initiate from invisibility.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're almost reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, exactly. It bridges the gap between damage and that escape ability, which you were talking about earlier. So that's interesting. But unless you guys have anything else to add on the nuances of these builds, I think I'm going to close us out. We've done our time, gentlemen. Done our time in the old .p jail yard. So,
I want to share a story about tilting before we go. I've thought of this while we were talking. You guys have heard of a little guy named Jackie Mao, right? Eternal Envy.
Oh, just a little.
He's just this little dude, right? He is a guy who, for people who don't know him, he's a professional Dota player. He's one of the best players. He's lauded as one of the best players in the world on one of the best teams in the world right now, Team Secret. When he first started trying to be a professional player, he suspended his education to do it. He made this big announcement. He got just absolutely harangued on forums by other Dota players that said, you're never going to make it, you're going to drop out of the professional scene, you're never going to make any money, but he went for it, right? He started a little team called No Tidehunter. Have you guys heard of this team?
Yep.
Okay. No Tidehunter, for those of you who have not heard of this team, would later on become called Alliance. He played with Black, he played with Loda, he played with S4, and they did really well for a period of time. And then they hit some roster instability in 2013. They continued to trade out players every now and then until Eternal Envy was the only player on that team who was non-Swedish, right? He's also the most inexperienced player on that team. And they kicked him. He was the captain of that team. He was one of the founding members of that team. They kicked him from his own team. That's a low point in his career, obviously. They go on to become the international champions. They had, through that period in 2014, one of the most meteoric, if not the most meteoric, rises and periods of sustained success in Dota history. And Eternal Envy was almost there, and he got kicked from his own team before it. But instead of giving up, instead of blaming No Tidehunter for kicking him, instead of getting angry, instead of getting mad, what Jackie Mao did was he started a new team, or he joined into new team. He changed positions from hard support to hard carry, and he made that shit work. He played on Cloud9 after a short stint proving himself on a team called Kai-P, played on Cloud9, and became one of the most reliable teams in Dota. Despite the fact that they did not win very often, they were almost always in the top 3, right? They were in. He has gone from being kicked from his own team to being Dota legend, essentially, and continuing to grow. So every time you have a bad game or series of games, and you're pissed off at the world, and you think it can't get worse, just remember Jackie Mao. Remember all the pressure he was under. Remember that situation where he got kicked from his own damn team, and he still persevered. He changed his role. He changed everything. He continued to get better, and now he dominates Dota.
That's a fantastic story. I like that.
Lesson learned. Don't play support, play hard carry, and Tryhard Tuesdays out.
And also drop out of school for Dota.
Yes, yeah,
obviously.
Fuck school.
Yep. But I'm going to close this out, guys. Gorgon, why don't you tell people what you're up to, where they can find you, all your plugs. We know you love your plugs.
I love my plugs. You guys can just find me on Twitter at @TheWonderCow. I've got something on pseudo-random distribution and how you can manipulate it for your benefit coming out on Dota Buff sometime in the next week, so keep an eye out for that. That'll be announced on my Twitter. I've also got an article about the best player trades of all time coming out on The Score, I expect, sometime this week as well. And once again, just keep an eye on my Twitter at @TheWonderCow.
Fantastic. And what about you, my co-host Bluza?
You can find me at MrBlue22 on Twitter. You can find the YouTube channel at youtube.com/.ptv1, the number 1. And you can... That's it. That's all you're going to find me. I'm not going to be posting any cool articles about how to be the Bash Lord or anything.
Okay.
Nope.
Cool. And as for me, you can find me at @p_wazoo on Twitter. Also wanted to plug Korean Barbecue and Woodtree show.
Man. I love both of those.
They're both fantastic. They have a pro-centric Dota 2 show that comes out on Wednesdays. So go check that out, guys. They have a good viewer or a good listenership, I suppose it is already, and it's really solid content. It's very succinct, and it scratches the itch. If you liked Gorgon's Envy story, then there's a lot more pro information in that show. So
and drama.
Yeah, drama too. I mean, they cover that really well.
That juicy drama. Ursi, talking to you, baby.
Oh, yeah. All right, guys. Well, this has been another iteration of Tryhard Tuesdays. I thank you guys for joining me, Gorgon and Blue. And you know how it goes, guys. Stay hard, stay classy, and drop out of school for Dota.